So that's how I use my TV. But last September, traveling, I was in these hotel rooms with a TV, and I turned it on, and I found these financial channels full of barking dogs. Well, actually, they were not dogs. They were human beings. They were yapping and yelping and barking about impending doom, and I'd never heard the like of it before. You'd have programs with 4 or 5 people on at once, all barking simultaneously. I didn't, I was tempted to think the world had gone to the dogs. But it was clear that everybody had lost his composure the last week of September last year. And they'd interview Hank Paulson, the Secretary of the Treasury, and he would bark a little bit. And they would talk to Ben Bernanke, and he would bark. And so, the whole world was barking like my little dachshund puppy when she's frightened. She really squeals. You think she's going to be eaten by a giant condor or something. That's the way the government was yelping last September. And I don't expect you to take my word for this, so I actually brought along an expert to quote here. And this is a quotation from a congressman. It happens to be one you've probably heard of, Ron Paul, who wrote a few days after the bailout bill was passed on October 3rd, the rallying cry heard all over the Hill the past 2 weeks was that Congress must act. Our economy is facing a meltdown. Okay? Now, for those of you who've been going to classes learning that an economy is a whole lot of transactions and arrangements that people make with one another, not at all like the fuel pile of a nuclear reactor. Well, get over that, because our economy is facing a meltdown. A lot of people use that metaphor. Other people, strangely enough, said it was freezing up. I spent several weeks doing research on whether it was getting cold or hot. But anyhow, it was melting down and freezing up all at once. Would this bill fix it? Nobody could really explain how it would. In fact, few demonstrated any real understanding of credit markets, of derivatives, of credit default swaps, or mortgage-backed securities. If they did, they would have known better than to vote for this bill. All they knew was that this administration was saying some frightening things and asking for a lot of money. So they got their $700 bailout bill, which, as I say, after a year, they're going to use to acquire a tiny, tiny fraction of toxic assets now held by banks and other financial institutions. So that's the government we rely on to take care of us in troubled times. There was a lot of ebb and flow in both of these meltdowns. And a lot of it had to do on both occasions with the quality of the economic analysis people were bringing to bear. And when I say that, I don't mean just ordinary people. We don't expect them to be very knowledgeable about economic analysis. That's not what they do. They have other jobs. But I include also professional economists who I would have to say on both of these occasions acquitted themselves most disgracefully. Horribly, in fact. An article was written last January in the New York Times by a reporter who had gone to the meetings of the American Economic Association. And he wrote about what the people were saying there. What are these economists saying in their presentations they make, and what do they tell you when you interview them out in the corridors? And basically what they were saying was what I call vulgar Keynesianism. This is the level of macroeconomic understanding circa 1949. What you would get if you read the first edition of Samuelson's textbook, Economics. Maybe not quite that good, actually. Ground had been lost, it seems. Here we had the professional economists of the United States, the premier economists of the world. People come from all over the world to study economics in this country. And I say to them, don't bother. Okay? Go home. There may be a few places where you can learn something, but damn few. This happens to be one of them, by the way. So if you're a student here, just luck serves you well. You landed in a place where you can learn some real economics, but in most places you won't. You'll learn this crackpot stuff. Now, back in 1929, 30, 31, there were some good economists, just as there are now some GMU economists that know which end is up, but not very many. And there are all kinds of crackpot ideas floating around and being used as the basis for important public policies. There was a professor at Cornell. His name was Warren. And all economic historians love this guy Warren, because Warren and another guy named Pearson cooked up a price index at a time when we didn't have a long price index. And, that's a big help in doing economic history, to have some idea what was happening to the general run of prices over time. So Warren and Pearson, heroes. But Warren was a nutty economist. He was pretty good at collecting price data and making them into index numbers. But he got the idea that the way to get out of the Depression was by raising prices. See, prices had fallen so much in the early 1930s, 25 to 30%, depending on which prices you look at. So he said, if we can only get prices back up again, and this, by the way, was probably the most widely accepted idea of the early 30s. If only we can have reflation, if we can get prices back up again, all will be well. So Warren came in and he sold President Roosevelt on the idea that we should get prices up. Roosevelt already believed that. He was easy on that. But the way to do it, Warren said, it's easy. I have, from my studies of prices, determined that there's a virtually perfect correlation between the price of gold and the price of other commodities. So if you just unhinge the Treasury from the gold standard, and so instead of giving everybody $20.67 in exchange for an ounce of gold, give them more. Give them a higher dollar price for their gold. Gold prices will rise, and the United States has such a big part of the world's gold stock that we can do this. We can finagle the world price of gold, drive it up, and the result will be we'll lift ourselves out of the Depression. And Roosevelt thought this sounded cool. He says, yeah, let's do that. So that's what the United States government did. They got the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, created under Hoover in 1932, which continued to be the major spending and lending agency under the New Deal. And the RFC undertook to start going into the gold market and buying gold, offering a little more each day to jack the price up every day. They decided how much to jack it up by coming in at breakfast time and checking with Roosevelt. Well, Mr. President, how much do you want the price up today? One time, according to Morgenthau, the Treasury Secretary, Roosevelt's lying in bed still. He did a lot of stuff in bed in the morning, and he said, 21 cents today. I said, well, exactly 21? Yes, 21 cents. Well, why, Mr. President? Why 21 cents? He says, because that's a lucky number. Think about this. This is the President of the United States in the process of wrecking the gold standard, and he's doing it on the basis of silly, childish nonsense. And that's how the world was ruled and led to catastrophe. Not just that way, but in dozens, hundreds of government policies, counterproductive, destructive, tearing apart the price system, substituting bureaucratic decisions for the decisions made by millions of decentralized decision makers with knowledge of their local circumstances that nobody in Washington could know or cared to know. So, unfortunately, the government did something. It did a lot. It, as Roosevelt liked to say, try something. If things are in bad shape, try something. Like, what? Anything. Try it. Because if it doesn't work, then try something else. That was Roosevelt's formula. This was a formula for blind flailing. Because every crackpot with an idea that waltzed into Washington or had a lobbyist with any clout managed to get his program put into law. And pretty soon you had an economy so messed up by crackpot policies that it was just a gigantic tangle of unproductiveness. The wonder is that this economy ever recovered at all, that it didn't just dissolve into a mass of poverty and death. Because the government can do that. It can do it. It's done it before in different places. The government of Zimbabwe killed a big number of people in that country recently by bad economic policy.